Okay, so I need to begin with an honest confession here, okay? My name is Brian, and I am a recovering people pleaser. And maybe, if the journey looks like here to here, maybe I'm about here. So I'm still not done being a people pleaser in my life. I'm still struggling with this. But if you want to know how bad I was, this is embarrassing, but it's true. So when I was a young pastor, so I got hired in 1991 to pastor a church in Madison. So I've been doing this for a long time, and I was such a people pleaser. I wanted everybody to like me. And it was a tiny little, very traditional church in Madison that I was serving at, and usually maybe on a Sunday morning we'd have 20 or 30 people. Really small. And then one Sunday I stood up to speak, and there were 4 new families in the building that day. 4 of them, all in a row. There was big long pews in that church, and they were all lined up, and it's like, oh my goodness. So you're like, wow, 4 new families. And so afterwards I got to talk to them, and it turns out all of them worked for this one guy. He had run this business in California. It was too expensive to keep the business in California, so he moved it to Madison. Taxes were cheaper. And so all the families came with him. They were all Christians. They all went to this cool church out in California. And they came and they started attending and they liked it. But they didn't like the music because the music in that church was very traditional. So every Sunday, I kid you not, it always was the same way. We started with a hymn, then we would do announcements and we'd do a second hymn, and then we'd pass the offering and I'd do my sermon, and then we'd close with a hymn. Every single Sunday was always the same. And they're like, we kind of like the service, and we like what you're doing, but could we do some more contemporary, could we do something a little more contemporary, like a little worship set in the middle? So just keep the beginning and ending hymn, and we'll put we'll lead it. They were good singers, good musicians, and then we're going to use cutting edge technology like this overhead projector. And we'll have the words on an overhead projector, and we'll slide them along, and we'll put a screen up. And so I'm like, well, this sounds so cutting edge. You go right ahead and do that. And I gave him permission without telling anyone. And so the next Sunday, they're all ready to go. We do the opening hymn, we do the announcements, and then all of a sudden, instead of a hymn, this group comes up and they stand over by the overhead projector and they lead the church in some worship choruses. And oh my goodness, World War III erupted that day in that church. I mean, you'd have thought that I allowed people to come and rip pages out of the Bible in front of everybody or something like that. I mean, they just went nuts. They were like, how dare you? 3 hymns were good enough for Jesus. It's good enough for us. We don't need anything more than that. And that's how they always talk. So anyway, it's like, oh, come on, this is ridiculous. So they were all mad at me, and I'm like, oh no, what do I do? How do I make everybody happy? And that was my goal. And so I tried to make everybody happy. And then meanwhile, this group wanted more. They wanted more of the service and more of the service. And they wanted none of that in the service. And so we had these 2 warring parties. And then all of a sudden, people started coming because they liked that music. So now you had a church within a church and 2 divided groups in the church. And I'm just this young pastor. I have no idea what I'm doing. I just want everybody to like me. And so that was a recipe for disaster. So finally the day came after doing this for months and months and months, and I'm trying to mediate between the conflict, and people are leaving, and the California families asked for something more. I don't even remember what they asked. They wanted more of the service, is what I remember. And I had to say no to them. The next Sunday, they never came back. The moment I said no to them, every single one of them left. And then, of course, that whole piece was gone from our service. So now the people that came because they liked it, they all started leaving. And all the old people that were still there from the original, the few that made it through, they hated me because I'd allowed that thing to happen. And now all of a sudden we're back to 3 hymns. And everybody was mad at me. And that was the moment I realized it is impossible to please people. It's not difficult. It is impossible. Because the moment you make this group happy, you make this group mad. I mean, look at our fractured society right now. Are we all in camps? Oh my goodness, there's camps everywhere in our society on every subject. You can't please people. You cannot please people. And it took me a long time to learn that, and a lot of pain, and you make yourself miserable. And I know I'm not the only one in this room who's ever done that. I mean, how many of you have had situations where you said yes when you really wanted to say no? How many of you had that? How many of you have had situations where you let somebody take advantage of you only because you couldn't say no? And you think about how it impacts so many areas of our life. How many of you have ever been in a situation where you hid your faith from somebody because you were afraid that they wouldn't like what you actually believe? You ever had that? You were afraid to talk about what you believe. How many of you have ever made a poor financial decision? How many of you, I'd love to, don't respond. How many of you have ever made a loan to somebody you didn't want to make a loan to, but you really felt pressured to? And it wasn't what you wanted, and it turned into, or how many of you ever bought, my age and older, how many of you ever bought an encyclopedia set, right? The young kids are like, what's that? It's like, yeah, I had one. It's in the dump somewhere now, right? I mean, or one of those vacuum salesmen used to high pressure. I mean, all of these salesmen that used to come to our house are like, we can't say no. Or how many of you have an overloaded schedule even today? Because you just can't say no. Because people just keep asking and you keep saying yes, when the reality is you should be saying no. So this is a big deal. And the interesting thing is, do you know that there's this woman named Bronnie Ware who's a palliative nurse, and I've quoted her before. She works with the dying, and she wrote a book about the 5 greatest regrets of people who are dying. The number one regret of dying people is this: I wish I hadn't made decisions based on what other people think. I wish I hadn't made decisions based on what other people think. Will that be you? Will you be saying that? So that's why we're starting a brand new series today, and we're just calling it Reset. There are some things in life that we need to hit the reset button on. We cannot allow these to continue anymore. And one of them is this. This is the big one. How do you stop being a people pleaser? Because this will take you away from God. So how do we get control of this in our lives? So I want to ask you to open up your program. Inside you'll have these notes and a pen. I want to ask you to grab your notes, grab a pen. We're going to write down some things as we go through this today. Welcome to those of you who are watching online. If you are watching on our Peniel site, penielchurchlife.com, you can get the notes right there. So I want to ask you to open them up and take a look at this. And of course, I've got 5 points, which means I'm only going to do 3 of them. So I apologize to all of you who love to fill everything in. We're jumping into number 3. Give yourself time to decide. This is the most important thing I have ever learned about people pleasing. The most important thing I've ever learned. So take it from a people pleaser. I'm so sorry to have to tell you stories about how bad I was, but here's another one. This one makes me really sad. So there was a young man who, in the church in Madison at that time, who wanted to start a youth group. Now, that's a good thing, right? He volunteers to start a youth group, and he starts meeting with the kids on Wednesday night, and he's doing all this stuff for them, and it was really cool. And it starts to grow, because he was a cool guy, and he did all these neat things with the kids. And then the day came where he said he wanted to do this big Saturday morning blast, and he was going to have all the kids invite their friends, and he was going to walk backwards like 5 miles to the church and do it as like a fundraiser, and it was kind of a cool thing. And he said, Brian, I want you there that Saturday morning. I want you to do a piece of it. And I'm like, I can't. I'll be out of town. I won't even be there. And he would not take no for an answer. So I said yes, knowing I wouldn't even be in town. So that Saturday morning comes, he calls me, where are you? And I said, well, I'm not going to make it. And he slammed the phone down, finished the event, and quit the next day. And I don't blame him. That's not his deal. That was mine. Because I couldn't stick to my no when I told him no originally. These stories feel terrible telling you. But it's the reality of how bad I was. There are a lot of reasons why I was such a bad people pleaser. If you aren't raised in a home where you're allowed to say no, it's one of the top reasons why you're going to struggle with people pleasing. Many of you were raised in a home where no was not allowed. So you never learned it. So when you get out on your own, you have to learn it. Something you should have learned in your home, you have to learn as an adult. So created a lot of pain. So one of the things that I learned early on, not long after those experiences, was this. Here is the key to starting to get a handle on people pleasing. You learn the secret of delay. You learn the secret of delay. This began to totally change my life when I learned this. So you're in a situation and you're like, hey, I need you to do this for me. Can you do this for me? And you don't want to do it for them. And so what you do, and they're high pressure, they're just not going to take no for an answer. And so you delay the response. Let me check my schedule, or let me talk to my spouse, or I'll get back to you tomorrow, or whatever it is. That first one is the one I default to. Let me check my schedule. Now, it's true. I have 2 jobs. I'm a busy guy. I can't just say yes to everything. So, and I have never, in all the years of using that, had someone say, no, you can't check your schedule. You have to tell me now, ever. Nobody ever says that. Even the pushiest people I've ever met always give you that one. Always. So it's like the perfect delay. And what it does is it gives you space between you and the pushy person who just doesn't care about your boundaries. They just want you to do whatever they want you to do. So you create that space, and then you do this. I'll flip your notes over on the back. At the very bottom, I've given you 4 questions to ask before you decide, and they're up here on the slide as well. The first question is something some of you have never asked. Do you want to do it? Do you want to make the loan? Do you want to say yes to the event? Do you want to bake 4 dozen cookies for the school outing? Do you want to be a chaperone? Do you want to? Some of you are just so not used to asking what you actually want or need. But it's a legit question. So you ask that question, and then you say, what will I have to give up if I say yes to this? And do I feel pressured to do this? And then here for me is the defining question for me as a Christian. I ask all of those other ones, but this is the key. Do I really think God may want me to do this? And I'll pray about it. Many times I'll put the delay and say, let me give that some thought. I need to talk to God about it. And then I could pray and say, God, I got this opportunity. Should I say yes or no? What do you want? And there have been many times that my answer to the first question is no, I don't want to do it. But when I pray about it, I think that God wants me to do it. Now, here's why that's significant to me. Jesus modeled this for all of us when he said, I have come down from heaven to do the will of God, the Father, who sent me, not to do my own will. So that matters to me. If I'm praying about something and I think that God wants me to do it, the answer has to be yes, even if I may not want to do it. Responding to his prompting is really serious. So those are the questions that I go through. And there have been plenty of times in my life where I didn't want to do it, but I really felt like God wanted me to, and then the answer is yes. All right, so let's say the answer is no, though. Okay? Let's say that this week you get a request for something you don't want to do. And you put a delay in, you say, let me check my schedule. Let me get back to you. And then you go and you ask those questions, and you're like, nope, no. So you got away from the pushy person, and now you've got this space, and you're like, all right, I know that I'm going to say no. So now, and you know that the no is not going to be well received. This helps, by the way, if you think of some pushy person in your life who just doesn't care about your boundaries. Have them in your mind. So you're just like, I'm going to say no to them, and I know that my no is not going to be well received. Well, letter number 4 is practice saying no beforehand. And this is one of the cool things about the power of our brains and what our brains can do. You can actually train your brain to get more comfortable saying no by practicing beforehand. So when I left that church in Madison to start a church, when you start a church and nobody is there and you want the church to grow, you think that you need 2 things, right? You need people and you need money. That's what you think you need. Now, the reality is what you need more than anything is simply God. Because if God is really present, then the people and money come. All healthy things grow. So if it's healthy, it'll grow. But I was young, and so as a young pastor, I'm like, all right, I need people. And so one day we started this service, and we're a small little church, and one day into the small little service that we had came a family, and afterwards found out he was a doctor. And he had a family that came with him. And so in the tiny little group, all of a sudden we got a doctor attending. Wow, that's so cool. And as a young pastor with all this, you're like, oh my goodness, we need him. We need his money and we need his family to attend. It's so exciting. I mean, it's so mercenary to talk about it like this with you. But I'm telling you the truth, okay? I'm not lying to you. Those things are in your mind when you start a church and you're scared that it might not make it. And so he started attending for a while, a really nice family, and then all of a sudden one Sunday after he said, you know what, I really like the teaching, I like what you're doing here, but I hate the music. Number 1 thing, by the way, that always splits churches, music. Number 1 thing. And he said, I don't like the music, and we were doing very contemporary music, and he said, how about at the start of every service, I have this old VHS tape. I'm not kidding. And it's got all of his style of music on it. pretty old style of music. He said, how about if we start the service every week, we push that VHS tape in and press play. By the way, kids, if you don't know what a VHS tape is, ask your parents on the way home. So VHS tape and press play, and then we'll just sing along to the VHS tape every week, and then you can do the rest of what you want to do. And I'm like, remember, hit the pause button, put the delay. Let me think about that. I'll get back to you. Because I'm like, oh my goodness, there's zero part. So then you walk away and it's like, all right, well, do I want to do that? No, that sounds terrible to me. Is it something that I think will help our church grow? No. And so I walk through the questions. Do I feel like God wants me to say yes to this? No, it's not what I feel like God wants me to say yes to. So now I'm a little concerned because I know what's going to happen the next Sunday when I see him and he asks about the VHS tape. So you rehearse it. So I rehearsed saying no politely, respectfully, and sure enough, the next Sunday came and I said no, and he never came back. That's how it goes. That's exactly how it goes. But one of the key things was practicing saying no beforehand. So here's a couple of things I've learned about this. Visualize yourself saying no. And again, this is really important with the pushy people in your life that you have a hard time. Now, some of you, by the way, relationally, you are just like, I don't understand why Brian has to talk about it. Some of you, personality-wise, you're just like, I just say no whenever I want to say no. You can't understand why we actually have to do a message on this, right? Isn't that true? There are people in this world who are like, this is a crazy topic. Yeah, the majority of the world, though, doesn't get what you are like. The majority of the world really struggles with this. And so visualize saying no to them. And the reason this is important is because of the field of neuroscience. You know what happens to your brain when you start rehearsing, visualizing yourself saying no? It forms stronger connections in your brain so that it gets easier to do it. So God wired your brain to respond to this. Second, be assertive. You're going to be assertive. You're going to visualize yourself saying no in that tough situation. You're going to be assertive. And this is really important because you got two extremes, right? When it comes to saying no, the extreme that so many Americans fall into is passive. Look at this. Passive is emotionally dishonest. You're not telling them what you really think. It's indirect, inhibited, self-denying, blaming, apologetic. Look at the quote at the bottom. Other people's rights and needs take precedence over mine. Some of you, that's how you've lived. And do you know what you get if you live that way? You get a miserable life, constant conflict, relationships that fall apart because you can't build anything great with emotional dishonesty. On the other extreme is aggressive. It's inappropriately honest and direct and expressive and attacking and blaming and controlling and self-enhancing at the expense of others. These are people who would never say that, but that's what they say. I boldly insist that my rights and needs prevail. And they're going to do whatever it takes to make sure their rights and needs prevail. So that's aggressive. You got passive and aggressive. Which way do you fall? Which way does the needle point for you? Are you on the passive side? Are you on the aggressive side? Because the goal is in the middle, and it's assertive, where you are appropriately honest and you are direct and self-enhancing and expressive and self-confident and empathetic to the emotions of everybody involved. But I clearly express that we both have rights and needs. That's nice, right? We both have rights and we both have needs. And you're able to understand and go to the middle because that's what we want to develop. So I visualize saying yes, I visualize being assertive, and one of the key things you have to learn in life to really start handling pushy people is stop trying to explain or justify your no. They don't need to know. If you will make yourself crazy trying to convince people to accept your reasons for saying no. So stop trying. You have the right to just say no. You want to know who gives you the right to just say no? Jesus. Look at what he said. Just say a simple yes, I will, or no, I won't. Jesus actually gives you permission to simply say yes, no, without having to defend it. You know why you don't want to defend it? You know what's so troublesome about this? Unreasonable people are, I want to use the word crazy, but that doesn't sound very nice. So they live in a different world than you do. And if you try and defend your no with these people, they'll suck you in. And before you know it, they'll twist you up and you'll be saying yes to something you want to say no to. So stop trying to justify it, defend it, or explain it, or make them understand. But I just want them to understand my no. Stop it. Just say no. Jesus actually just says, just say yes or no, okay? Just let it go from there. You don't have to do that. All right, so here's the scenario. You've been asked to do something that you don't want to do. And so you've hit the pause button. It's like, let me think about that. I'll get back to you next week. So you hit pause, you go through the questions, you're like, I don't want to do this. And I don't feel God calling me to do it. And so now you know that they're not going to respond too well. And so you practice in your mind, I'm visualize myself saying no respectfully, right? You're not going to be a jerk about it. You're just going to say no. You're not going to defend it. You're not going to explain it. You're just going to say no. Two things are going to happen, right? Two things. If you're a people pleaser, what's going to happen inside of you when you say no? What emotion are you going to feel? Guilt, right? I see people mouthing it. You're going to feel guilty, right? Some of you know exactly what I'm talking about because every time you say no, you feel guilty. Here's what you need to do is you need to put a sign up somewhere that says, celebrate the guilt. That's what you need to put up. Celebrate the guilt. You need to hang that up. And you need to remind yourself that every time you feel guilty for saying no, that you are on the right track. You just had a win. You just had a win because it's not how you look at it, is it? There's such a thing in this world as false guilt. And that's false guilt. You don't need to feel guilty. Jesus gives you the right to say no. But what's the other thing that's going to happen when you say no, especially to an unreasonable person? You're going to feel guilty, and how are they going to respond? They're going to say, oh, well, thank you very much for considering it. Right? That's what they're going to do? No. What are you going to see? What emotion are you going to see in them? Anger. You're going to see anger, and it's going to come out in one of two ways, right? We talk about this when we teach on crucial conversations. There's two ways people get angry. There's the silence or violence, right? So the silence is, and they're going to pout, and they're going to turn away from you, and they're going to stop talking to you, and all of that's manipulation, by the way, to get you to do what they want you to do. Or they're going to come at you aggressively. They're going to be angry, and they're going, oh, how dare you do that? And this is where people fold all the time. It's like, fine, I'll just do it, right? Because you don't want to deal with the anger. So you got to prep yourself for the anger, and this is critical. You have to learn how to put the right thoughts in your mind when you see people responding with anger to your reasonable no. Okay? You've got to learn how to put the right thoughts in your mind because they won't be there. And if you're really struggling on the passive side, you're going to have to make sure this may be the most important part of the message for you. If you really, really struggle with passivity, you got to remember these 4 key truths. So let's jump right into them. First, remember what you are responsible for. You will make yourself miserable if you get confused about what you are responsible for in this world. You'll make yourself absolutely sick. So let me show you this, and this is from one of my favorite teachers and authors, Dr. Henry Cloud. Dr. Henry Cloud talks about the subject of boundaries, right? So if you don't like your neighbor, you can do this, right? On your property, you can put a huge boundary up. Now, they can do anything they want on their side of on the fence, right? It's their side of the fence. You don't want to look at it? Build it bigger. Big as you want, because it's theirs. This is their yard. They can do anything they want over here as long as the city allows it. And man, they can even pay the fines and keep going if they want to, right? But you don't have to be impacted by it. And so that's the concept of a boundary. And so the Bible would say that you are responsible for certain things. So think of it in terms of yards. You, individually, I am my own yard with my own fence. Then every person that I come in contact with is their own house with their own property. We got boundaries between us. Here's what God says. When it comes to my yard, what I'm responsible for in my yard, I am 100% responsible for my thoughts, words, reactions, feelings, and choices. You know what I am 0% responsible for? Anything in your yard. 0%. I am not responsible for 1% of your thoughts, or your words, or your actions, or your reactions, or your choices. I am 0% responsible for them. Because do you know how much I have control over what goes on in your yard? I have no control over that. That's your yard. You can do anything you want over there. I have 0 control about how you react to me saying no, right? None. How many of you think that you can control another human being? Right? You can't control you on most days, but you're going to control somebody else? Right? I'm not lying. I'm not a perfectly self-controlled human being. Well, you should see me with chocolate. It's crazy. I can't control this. You think I'm going to control that? No. And God says, I am not in control at all over them. I will never enter into heaven and stand in front of God and say, God will say, Brian, why didn't you do more for them? Why didn't you make their thoughts better? Why didn't you control their reactions? It's ridiculous even to say it, and yeah, that's what we try and do. We're going to give in because we want to control their reactions. I am not responsible for how you react when I say no. Does that make sense? I am not responsible for how you react when I say no to you. That's all your yard. I can't control it, and I will make myself sick if I try. This is, you know what this is, right? Toddler throwing a temper tantrum, and this is what people do, right, when they don't get what they want. Oh, by the way, adults do it too. Adults do it too. You know how many videos I could show you of adults throwing temper tantrums, right? Then they don't get what they want. Some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. You got people that when you say no to them, they go to silence or violence. That's just an adult temper tantrum. But you are not responsible to fix it. If you give in to this, what happens? Do they get better? So don't give in to this. You don't give in to this. Silence or violence, that's their deal. You know, if they want to roll around on the aisle, that's their deal. You just walk away. You are not responsible to God, so keep that clear. Second thing to remember is that even Jesus couldn't please people. That is an amazing sentence to me. Even Jesus couldn't please people. He was the perfect Son of God who left heaven to give his life for all of us, who ran around healing people, teaching people, helping people, and even he couldn't please people. But you think you will? You think you will? You think in the back of your mind you're going to make people happy? Look at what the Bible says about it. He came to his own people, and even they rejected him. So the truth is this. There will always be people who don't like me. Now, what I want to ask you to do is I want to ask you to say that sentence with me and think about if it makes any kind of emotional reaction inside of you. Okay? Ready? So, there will always be people who don't like me. Let's do it one more time. There will always be people who don't like me. Does that make you react at all? It's like, oh, I don't like that. Okay, or maybe that's telling you which way the needle goes. But the truth is, the perfect Son of God couldn't make everybody pleased. You have no shot. None. So don't make it a goal. Make doing the will of God your goal. Because if God is happy and people aren't, oh well. Because you'll never make people happy. So make God happy. Remember, I have the right to say no. Some of you really struggle with this one. This is what trips you up. You don't think you have the right to say no. And again, we go back to Jesus for the answer on this. Jesus is the key to all of this. Did Jesus ever say no to good things? Did Jesus ever say no to good things? One time he was in this village and he was healing people. I mean, talk about a good thing. It would be so cool if Jesus just came here right now and set up shop in Penuel. And all of you, it's like, this shoulder really hurts. I got arthritis, Jesus. And he goes, pow, and it's all gone. That'd be cool, right? And all of us who are sick or ill or anything going on, we just come up to him and he just, with a touch or a word, he heals us. And he does all this cool stuff and he sits up here teaching me. I mean, I will gladly sit down if Jesus wants to stand up. That's awesome. Great trade-off for all of us. And so he's teaching in this village. He's doing all this cool stuff. And it says, rising very early before dawn, he left and went off to a deserted place where he was alone with God. He wanted to reconnect with his Father. And there's a model that we're going to talk about in this series. And then Simon, one of his disciples, and those who were with him, pursued him, and on finding him said, everyone is looking for you. Let's go back. And he told them, let's go on to the nearby villages that I may preach there also. So literally you had his disciples saying, let's go back into this village. They're all lined up, ready for day 2 of your big Jesus revival. We got a tent set up. We got refreshments. We're all ready to go. Come on back. And Jesus says, no. No. Jesus says no to good things. Some of you, especially Christians, you have an overdeveloped sense of conscience where you feel like you can't even say no to good things. Jesus did. You have the right to say no. Some of you, this is the key slide in the whole thing today, is to understand I have the right to say no without feeling guilty. Did you know that? You have the right to say no without feeling guilty. You have the right to decide what's best for you. You have the right to change your mind. You have the right to express how you feel. And you have the right to ask for what you want. Now, everybody else around you has those same rights too. But you have the right to those things. And for some of you, you do not know that, and this is what gets you off kilter and overloaded, is because you don't think you have the right to say no. For some of you, that's the key slide right there. Is to understand that these are the rights that Jesus gives you because your time and energy and money are limited. You cannot say yes to everything. Follow his example. Go back to those questions. God, is this really something you want me to say yes to? Let his will be your guide. And then the biggest thing of all, the thing that is, again, the second greatest impact on my life has come from this sentence. You remember, even if they reject me, God never will. Second greatest impact in my life. You hit pause, you're going to delay it, you give yourself time to think about it, you pray, you make the decision, and so many times, because of the world that we live in, they get angry, and they do reject you. And they won't let you be around anymore. And you pay a high price for saying no to some people, right? You can pay a really big price for saying no to some people. But you don't ever pay that with God. The coolest thing about Jesus, any human being, anytime, anywhere, no matter what they've done, who comes to Jesus and just humbly says, I get it, I need you, come into my life. At that moment of faith, you get two things from God. You get what you will not find in this world very often. You get unconditional love and unconditional acceptance. You get both of those things. Now, the unconditional acceptance is so amazing that what he does in that moment of faith, when you give your life to him, at that moment of faith, he puts you in his family. He actually signs adoption papers and puts his name right on it and adopts you into his family. And Jesus says that a son or daughter belongs to his family forever. Those are Jesus' words. So you are adopted into his family. At the moment you believe, you get his unconditional love, unconditional acceptance. You can never lose it. And this is so important. I want to ask you to think back to a dating relationship. First time you went out on a date with someone, anyone, it doesn't matter who. When you went out on the date with that person for the first time, did you tell them all the bad things in your life? Of course not, right? You kept it hidden. Because what was the thought in your mind? If I tell them, they'll leave. It's why we hide things from other people. We fear losing their love, and we fear losing their acceptance. And incredibly, when you come to Jesus, you will never fear one of those things one moment of your life, because, as one theologian put it, there's tremendous relief in knowing that his love to me is utterly realistic, based at every point on prior knowledge of the worst about me, so that no discovery now can disillusion him about me. Because people get disillusioned, right? If they only knew. They wouldn't want to be my friend. They wouldn't love me anymore. And God's love is this. He saw every moment, from the moment before you were born to the moment you will die. And the moment you come to him, he's got the whole picture already laid out, because he's outside of time. He sees it all. And at the moment you come to him in faith, he goes, unconditional love, welcome to my family forever. And nothing you can ever do or tell him will surprise him. So you are completely safe, which is why I say all the time, it is imperative that you get this right in life to have a life where you can diminish fear. The number one person in your life must be God Almighty. He must be the number one in your life. Because then when he's number one, then what he says about you matters more than anyone else. And what he says is, I just love you as you are. And you're so special to me just as you are. And I love having you in my family. And his message of truth to you gives you the ability to withstand tremendous rejection in this world. Because even if they reject me, he never will. And you put that in your mind over and over again. You're going to make a decision, you know it'll be unpopular, you know they won't like it or people won't like it, and you go through this again and again. Hey, even if everyone around me rejects me, my Father never will. And that gives you the ability to withstand this desire to please others. I know this isn't easy. I know that I sure hope I haven't made it sound easy. It has not been easy for me. Like I said at the beginning, your home of origin has a huge impact on how easy this is or hard for you. My home of origin, dissent was not allowed. My father was a Marine officer, and if you disagreed with him, you faced violence. So, and we all saw it. So if my stories are a little bit like, oh my goodness, this guy is so screwed up. Well, you were raised in a home where you are not allowed any voice at all. When you get out on your own, you have to learn your own voice. Things you should have learned at home, you don't learn at home. You have to learn somewhere. If you're struggling with being a people pleaser, then think about this. Where's that coming from? What's triggering that for you? If I could just say one thing to you today, it would be that hit that pause button. Always remember the pause button. When you're feeling pressured, pause. Say, let me check my schedule and get back to you. Now, all of you are going to start saying that to me, and I'm totally fine with that. Totally fine with that. And if you hear me saying it, be fine with it too. Because it is true. So it's like, all right, pause, and then go through those questions. Really, that first and that last are so important. Do I want to do it? And God, do you want me to be a part of this? And let His will become the most important thing for you. And always remember that foundation, that even though you can lose the love and acceptance of people around you, you can never lose His love and acceptance ever. Never. You can't even damage it. Let me have you bow your heads as we finish today. For some of you, you're just exploring your faith with us here or online, and this whole subject is really new to you. I want to start by saying that what we are really talking about here is a personal connection and deep relationship with a living God. And Jesus makes that possible. When He came to earth, He bled and died on a cross for all of us so that we could be completely forgiven. He gave His life for us. And anyone who comes to Jesus at any moment in their life receives the exact same thing. Unconditional love, unconditional acceptance. Do you know how excited He is? Do you know that God has been pursuing you every day of your life, just waiting for the day when you will finally give over your life to Him so that He could love you like He wants to love you? Maybe for you, this is that day. It's time to let Him into your life. With your head bowed and your eyes closed, you can say something like this to Him. Say, Jesus, I'm turning to you today. I need you. Would you please forgive me? I heard that you gave your life for me on a cross, so I'm asking you to forgive me. I want a new and real relationship with you. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, as we finish, would you all just take this little connection card out of your program? And you don't have to fill it all out, but some of you just prayed and asked Jesus to forgive you or renewed your commitment. Or some of you, this really tapped some big pain for you and you want us to pray for you. We'll pray for you as a church. So just put your prayer request down. And then what you do is drop it in one of the 2 offering boxes back by the doors where you came in,